Pus flooded Ezra Hart's new boot when the blister popped. Broken in on a dead man's foot, the boot creased the wrong way. For all the pain the stiff leather caused, Ezra thanked God for the protection from the bitter cold. It crept up from the frozen ground outside Princeton and settled into his bones, sharp and patient, the way cold always did when it meant to stay. The boot fit well enough once he stuffed a strip of blanket into the toe. A Cooper learned early how to make things work that were never meant to last. He had been at this for a year now, long enough that the beginning felt like another life, long enough that Brooklyn, the river, Trenton, both times, collapsed into a handful of hard images instead of a clean line of memory. A wall of smoke drifting the wrong way, ice grinding against boats, the sound a man makes when he realizes he is not going to stand back up. He did not dwell on those things. Dwelling made you slow. The morning of January 3rd broke thin and colorless. The sky had the dull sheen of iron left out overnight. Ezra stood with the rest of the line south of Princeton, breath fogging, fingers numb inside wool mitts that had once belonged to someone else. The army marched through the night, quiet and bent forward, wheels rapped, orders passed in murmurs. When they halted, there was no sense of arrival, just a stop, a shift. Men straightening, stamping feet, checking flints. Ezra pressed his heel down, feeling the dead man's shoes settle into the frozen earth. He had shaped staves and driven hoops since he was a boy, learned how wood answered pressure, how iron held only if it was tight in the right places. War had taught him similar lessons, though the materials were softer and broke more easily. Lines held until they didn't. Men stood until they ran. Nothing stayed true for long. Ahead of them, the land rolled gently, fields edged with bare trees, fences half buried in snow. Somewhere beyond that lay Princeton. Ezra had heard of it before the war. A college town, books and sermons and clean rooms. He had never been inside Nassau Hall. He doubted he ever would. The first shots came quick, sharper than Ezra expected, cracking the morning open. Word ran down the line in fragments. British, moving south, right ahead. Ezra shifted his grip on the musket, the stock worn smooth. The barrel was cold enough to bite. He thought about balance. Men surged forward in uneven bursts. Ezra followed, breath burning now. They reached a rise near an orchard, trees bare and black against the pale sky. Shapes moved there, red against brown, quick and organized. British regulars. Ezra learned the look of them. Straight lines, bright cloth, confidence that came from drill and habit. The line ahead wavered. Someone shouted. Someone else fell. Ezra saw a horse go down hard, legs folding, its rider thrown forward. The sound was wrong, a dull crack. Men began to pull back, stumbling, faces wide-eyed and streaked with sweat, despite the cold. Ezra stopped, because the men in front of him stopped. He could see the British advancing now, bayonets out, points catching the weak light. They moved like a machine. The space between the lines shrank with terrible speed. For a moment it felt like Brooklyn again, that sixth sense of being pressed, of knowing the ground behind you was worse than the ground ahead. Ezra's heart hammered. His left foot slipped slightly, the dead man's shoe skidding on frozen dirt. He caught himself, planted it harder. He thought of barrel hoops, how you struck them down evenly, not all at once, how you trusted the shape to hold if you did your part. Then Washington rode into the gap. Ezra didn't see him arrive. One moment there was confusion, men yelling, backs turned. The next, the tall figure on horseback was there, close. The horse stank of fear and hate. The horse reared. Washington's coat was dark, his face pale, his voice carrying in a way that cut through the noise without rising to a shout. The British fired. Smoke billowed, thick and blinding. Ezra flinched, braced, waiting for the sound of a body hitting the ground. When the smoke thinned, Washington was still there, still mounted, arm raised, urging the line forward. Something shifted then. Ezra never thought of himself as brave. He couldn't turn away while that man sat his horse in front of British muskets. Ezra stepped forward. The men around him did the same. The line tightened, imperfect but real. Artillery spoke from their right, a heavy tearing sound, grape shot ripping through the British ranks. Ezra fired when he was told, rammed, primed, fired again, movements automatic now, the air filled with noise and motion. Redcoats faltered, then broke, some running toward the road, others dropping where they stood. Ezra ran when the order came, boots and shoes pounding, breath ragged. He vaulted a low fence, felt the jolt up his legs, the left shoe holding. Ahead, British soldiers scattered toward Princeton. Ezra stopped. He bent over, hands on knees, lungs burning, and laughed. Town resistance came in pieces, a few volleys here, a brief stand there. Ezra saw men duck into buildings, smoke curl from windows. Someone pointed toward Nassau Hall. Thick stone walls loomed, British inside. Guns were dragged forward, muzzles leveled. Ezra stood back as the cannon fired, the concussion slamming into his chest. A ball punched through the building, stone dust bursting outward. Inside, the firing stopped. No single moment marked the end, just a slackening. Orders came slower. Men sat down where they were, suddenly exhausted. Ezra leaned against the fence post, the wood rough against his shoulder. He looked down at his feet. Mud clung to both shoes now, old and new alike. They were his for the moment. British prisoners were herded together, faces tight, eyes darting. Ezra just watched. He knew how thin the line was. By midday, word spread that Cornwallis was on the move, marching hard from Trenton. There would be no rest. Ezra helped tear up a bridge, timbers groaning as they fell, water rushing beneath. Then they turned north, toward the hills. The march that followed blurred into a long gray band in Ezra's memory. Roads frozen and rutted, houses passed without stopping. The sound of distant guns, constant, but never quite close. When they halted near the Watchung Mountains, Ezra dropped where he stood. Days later, the army settled into winter quarters. Ezra found a moment to himself. He sat on a log at the edge of camp, working a strip of leather with a knife. The dead man's shoe needed a new lace. He cut carefully, fingers stiff but sure. Around him, men talked low, the camp alive with small, necessary sounds. He thought of barrels stacked in a shed, the smell of oak and iron. The war changed how he looked at things. Objects mattered more now. Shoes, muskets, blankets. They were the difference between standing and falling, between moving and stopping. Ezra tied the lace tight and tested it, pulling, feeling the give. It would hold, for a while. He stood and walked a few steps, boots crunching on snow, and felt the ground steady under him. The hills rose ahead, dark and solid. Behind him lay Princeton, Trenton, the river, Brooklyn. He didn't turn to look.